Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Chris Martin, and I'm here to talk about a very important topic that I feel like a lot of people, myself included, aren't particularly great at. But first impressions are everything, and so it's something we should really be working on. And I couldn't find a lot of good information on this topic, so I decided to observe those who are good at it and put my notes here and my findings here. And that is the question of how to introduce yourself well. And introductions happen all the time, whether you're at a conference or in a job interview or just at a meeting at your company. It comes up all the time, and a lot of people, myself included, tend to sell themselves short and don't do a great job introducing themselves. One of the worst feelings in the world is when you're talking to somebody and their eyes glaze over when you start to introduce yourself, and it's like, ah. Anyway, so introductions are really important. It can spark interest and further conversation with whoever you're speaking with. It can establish your credibility and expertise. It can get you introductions to other people who might be interested in what you're doing, which is really cool. And it can be the difference between getting a job or not getting a job in the case of being in an interview or just networking with other people because they might be hiring, or they might eventually be looking to hire, or they might have the capacity to suggest you for a position if it ever comes up in their company. So you only have a couple seconds to do this right and to draw somebody's interest, so it's important to focus on how to do it right. Now, I see a lot of people post online some of the things that you would expect to see, and they're useful, don't get me wrong, but not that useful. So most of what I see is body language related things, like make sure you smile and make sure you look the people who you're speaking with in the eye, have a good handshake, and just in general exude confidence from yourself. And that is all really good, really important. You should do all that stuff. But when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, the practical, tactical stuff, what is it you should say and how should you go about saying it? So that's what we're going to get into today. Number one important point that a lot of successful people who do a good job introducing themselves do is they tailor their introduction to the person they're speaking with. So there's no one size fits all summary of exactly what they do. Now, the other important thing that this suggests is that you need to speak and introduce yourself in such a way that it's easy to digest by people from all sorts of backgrounds. So there's not one introduction that everybody will understand. If you're talking to people who are in your industry, they might understand some more specifics than somebody outside of your industry. So it's always a good bet to not get into the details in your introduction, but just say broadly what you do, terms that the general audience will understand. So, for instance, if you know HTML and CSS and JavaScript, that doesn't mean a lot to somebody outside of the tech industry. Instead, what you should be saying is that you build websites for. So people are kind of wired in such a way that they remember how somebody or something will benefit them in the future. That's how they tend to remember things. So you want to make sure it's tailored in such a way that you highlight what you do, practically speaking, for the average person to understand. Tied to this is that your job title is not particularly important. So you can mention it, there's nothing wrong with mentioning it, but to most people, your job title might not mean much. Each industry has so much jargon, so many acronyms that unless you're in that industry, you probably won't know what it actually means unless it's very clear in your titles by some chance. And even within one industry, one job title at one company might mean something completely different in a different company, all within the same industry. So you want to make sure that you highlight what you do on a day-to-day basis that's easy to understand, and don't get into the specifics unless somebody really asks you. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, getting really into the details, so what should you actually say line by line when you have a chance to say it? I have observed what seems to work best is 3 to 4 lines, and very simple, not long, not complicated. Line one, you're just saying your name. You can mention your job title if you want. So my name is Chris and I'm a web designer, or I build websites. Line two is where you want to establish your credibility and your expertise. So you want to say, I studied web design for 4 years in college, and for the past 3 years, I've been working at such and such company being a web designer and have built 100 websites or something. Just something that establishes why you know what you're doing and how long you've been doing it for. Line three is somewhat optional. It might be implied, given whatever the circumstances. But line three is, "I'm here because such and such reason." If you're at a meeting at work with your department and the goal is to eventually build a website, but not everybody knows that you're the web designer, you say, "I'm here because I'm the web designer and I'm going to be taking on this project when it takes off, or when we decide on what we want to do." If you're at a conference, it's a little bit, you can get a little more specific. You can say, "I'm here because I'm a web designer and I'm looking to become better at coding because I have some experience, but I want to sharpen those skills." Something like that. Line four is completely optional, and that can be a fun fact, like what you were doing before you were doing your current job. You can say where you went to school. It's also interesting to mention if you went to school for one thing, or you used to work in a different industry and now you've made a jump to this industry. That just kind of shows that you're a diverse person and you have an interesting background, and can lead to some more talking points in the future. You can also mention if you've worked on any cool projects. Where you're from is always a good one, especially if you're not from the local area or you're at a conference on the other side of the country or something like that. And if you have a sense of humor or have a positive, lighthearted comment you can make, you can throw in something just to lighten up and break the ice. So just a couple additional notes before I leave is you always want to keep it brief. Don't get too specific about what you're talking about when you're introducing yourself. Keep it broad. Business cards are still in style, so you should always carry fresh business cards, not ones that have been in your wallet for 3 years. So always carry them, and if you want to make somebody feel special, and this is just a side note, when you're giving them your business card, as you're giving them your business card, write your personal contact info on the back and give it to them, and that will make them feel like you've made a real genuine connection with them. So now, remember that an introduction is just the start to a conversation. So make sure you listen to their introduction and pay attention, and you'll create a bond with that person. So if you hear an introduction that you like, make sure you incorporate it into yours. There's no one-size-fits-all system to introducing yourself. These are just some guidelines. And if you have any suggestions or you hear anything out there that would be useful, please share them, those thoughts in the comment box below. And good luck.